Sarah Whitman first sensed something was wrong at 7:45 in the evening on November 3rd, 2023. The evening was unusually quiet in the Whitman household, a large Victorian house just outside Maplewood, Massachusetts. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors were the only sounds filling the empty space. Sarah was standing in the kitchen, her hands submerged in soapy water, scrubbing the same plate for what felt like an eternity. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the past few days like a broken record. Since marrying Daniel 3 months ago, Sarah had been trying to adjust to her new life. She had hoped this marriage would be her fresh start, a chance to leave behind the mess of her previous life. But Daniel's home felt more like a mausoleum, filled with shadows of a past that refused to let her in. And there was Alex, Daniel's 17-year-old son, whose icy demeanor had only grown colder since the wedding. That night, as the clock ticked toward 8 o'clock, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She heard a noise, faint, like a muffled thud, coming from upstairs. She paused, listening. Another thud, followed by a low creak. She turned off the faucet and wiped her hands on a dish towel, her heartbeat quickening. Her mind flashed back to the strange incidents that had started happening shortly after she moved in. The missing objects, the footsteps outside her bedroom door at odd hours, and the feeling of being watched. "Alex!" she called out, her voice echoing slightly. No response. She ascended the stairs, her footsteps cautious against the worn carpet. At the top of the staircase, she paused, listening. The air felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. She moved toward Alex's room and noticed his door slightly ajar. She pushed it open, the hinges squeaking in protest. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single lamp on the desk. Alex was seated at the edge of his bed, staring at something in his hands. He didn't look up as she entered. "Alex?" she said again, softer this time. He glanced up, his blue eyes reflecting the lamp's light like a cat's. "What do you want?" he replied, his tone flat, emotionless. "I heard a noise. Are you okay?" Alex smirked, a small, condescending smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She opened her mouth to speak but stopped when she saw what was in his hands, a framed photograph. The picture was of a young woman, smiling brightly at the camera, her arms around 2 boys, Alex and his half-brother Liam. It was the same photograph she had seen in the hallway downstairs, except this one had a large crack across the glass, bisecting the woman's face. "Is that your mother?" Sarah asked carefully. Alex's smile vanished. "What do you think?" he shot back, his tone sharper. He placed the frame face down on the bed and stood up, moving closer to her. "You're in her house, you know. You're sleeping in her bed, using her things, like you could ever replace her." Sarah swallowed, feeling the familiar sting of tears. She took a step back, trying to regain her composure. "I'm not trying to replace anyone, Alex," she said softly. "I just want us to get along, to be a family." Alex's expression darkened. "We were already a family," he muttered, "until you showed up." Sarah felt the temperature in the room drop. She nodded, retreating toward the door. "I'm sorry if you feel that way," she whispered. I'm just trying to make things work." He didn't reply, just watched her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She turned and walked out, closing the door behind her. As she descended the stairs, she heard his voice, low and almost inaudible. "You'll never be one of us." At 10:15 in the evening, Sarah sat alone in the living room, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that Alex's hostility was more than just a teenage rebellion. There was something else, something darker. She recalled the letters she had seen in the study earlier that week, letters from Alex to his brother Liam, filled with an obsessive, almost frantic tone. Liam had been away at college for months, but the letters spoke of a bond far beyond the ordinary. The clock chimed, breaking her thoughts. She needed to know more. She needed to understand what was happening in this house. As she stood up, ready to head back to the study, she heard a faint whisper from the top of the stairs. She looked up and saw Alex, standing in the shadows, his eyes fixed on her. He smiled. "You're looking in the wrong places, Sarah," he said softly. "But don't worry. You'll find out soon enough." And with that, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Sarah standing there, her heart pounding, wondering just how deep this family's secrets went. Sarah couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her since Alex's whispered words on the staircase. By 6:30 in the morning on November 4th, 2023, she was already awake, her eyes tracing the lines of the ceiling, mind racing with questions. She decided to follow her instinct and return to the study, hoping to find answers in the letters she had glimpsed earlier. By 6:45 in the morning, the house was still quiet. Daniel had already left for work, and Alex's door remained shut. Moving quickly, Sarah made her way to the study at the end of the hall. The room smelled faintly of dust and old paper, the air cool and still. She opened the drawer where she'd seen the letters before. Her fingers brushed against the rough edges of the envelopes, and she pulled them out, unfolding one of the more recent ones. The letter was dated October 15th, 2023, less than 3 weeks before she and Daniel had married. It was from Alex to his half-brother, Liam. "Liam, I miss you more than ever. Everything feels wrong without you here. She's coming, you know, the new one. Dad thinks she'll fix things, but he's wrong. You're the only one who can make it right. Please come home soon, before it's too late." A chill ran down her spine. The letter seemed more desperate than affectionate, and the urgency in Alex's words was unmistakable. She reached for another, this one from a few months earlier. "I've tried to be patient, but I can't anymore. She's taking everything. You promised me. You promised things would stay the same." Sarah's heart pounded. Alex wasn't just upset about her presence. He seemed genuinely afraid of something. She turned the envelope over, noticing a smudge of red ink. No, not ink. Blood. She brought it closer, her fingers trembling, when she heard a creak outside the study door. It was 7 o'clock in the morning now, and the house had begun to stir. She quickly shoved the letters back into the drawer just as Alex appeared in the doorway. His eyes flicked to the open drawer, then back to her. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge that set her nerves on fire. "I was looking for some paper," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. "I wanted to leave a note for your dad." Alex's gaze didn't waver. "You shouldn't go through other people's things," he said slowly, his tone filled with quiet warning. "You might find something you don't like." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline, her instincts telling her to leave the room immediately. "You're right, of course," she said, walking past him. But as she brushed by, Alex leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. "You won't find anything here, Sarah," he whispered. "The real secrets are hidden much deeper." She hurried down the stairs, her skin prickling with fear. What secrets was he talking about? And what did he mean by deeper? She needed to understand more, but she had to be careful. Alex was watching her every move. At 11:15 in the morning, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She drove into town and made her way to the Maplewood Public Library, where she hoped to find more information about the Whitman family. She found an old newspaper archive and began to search for anything connected to Alex, Liam, or Marie, the boy's late mother. After nearly an hour of searching, she stumbled upon a local news article dated September 14th, 2022. The headline read, "Tragedy Strikes Whitman Family. Son's Strange Illness Continues." The article detailed a mysterious illness that had affected Alex shortly after Liam left for college, a debilitating condition that left him bedridden for weeks. Doctors were baffled, unable to find a cause. But buried at the end of the article was a peculiar detail. Alex had refused to speak to anyone except Liam during his recovery. By 12:45 in the afternoon, Sarah's unease had turned to dread. There was something in this house, something in Alex, that went beyond teenage rebellion or grief. As she left the library, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She turned around and saw Alex standing across the street, watching her. He gave her a slow, knowing smile before turning and walking away. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Sarah returned home, her mind spinning with possibilities. She needed to confront Daniel, to ask him about the letters and Alex's strange behavior, but as soon as she walked through the door, she sensed something was wrong. The house was too quiet, the air thick with tension. She called out for Daniel, but only silence answered. Then she saw it. A single sheet of paper on the kitchen counter. Her heart pounded as she unfolded it. The handwriting was scrawled and frantic. "You shouldn't have gone looking, Sarah. Now it's too late." Her hands shook as she read the words. She felt the cold grip of fear tightening around her chest. What had she stumbled into? What did Alex know that she didn't? The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the seconds. It was 3:45 in the afternoon, and Sarah realized she was running out of time. She had to find out what Alex was hiding before it was too late. By 9:10 in the evening on November 4th, 2023, Sarah was pacing the kitchen, the note from Alex still clutched in her hand. Daniel wasn't home yet, and her attempts to reach him had gone unanswered. She glanced at the clock above the sink. Each tick seemed louder than the last, a relentless reminder that time was slipping away. She needed to act, but she felt trapped, unsure of whom to trust. At 9:25 in the evening, she made a decision. She grabbed her coat and headed up the stairs, her footsteps quick and determined. She stopped outside Alex's room, her heart hammering against her ribcage. She knocked softly, waiting, but there was no answer. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, only the faint glow of a streetlight outside casting shadows across the walls. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. Her gaze landed on Alex's desk. She moved closer, noticing a small leather-bound journal partially hidden under a pile of papers. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and grabbed it. The cover was worn, the pages slightly yellowed. She flipped it open to a random page and began to read. The entry was dated October 2nd, 2023. Alex's handwriting was small and neat, but his words were frantic, almost incoherent. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine. Liam says he loves me, but he left. He always leaves. She doesn't belong here. She's ruining everything. I have to make him see. I have to make him come back." Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the page. The next entry was dated October 29th, 2023, just days before she had found the letters. "I saw her in the study today, looking through my things. She knows something, I can feel it. But it doesn't matter. Liam will come back soon. I just have to wait a little longer." A wave of dread washed over her. Alex's obsession with Liam was more than she had realized. It wasn't just brotherly affection. There was something deeper, something darker. She flipped to the last entry, dated November 3rd, 2023, the night before. "Tomorrow everything changes. Liam will understand. I know how to make him see. She won't get in the way." Her breath caught in her throat. Tomorrow, today, was when everything would change. But how? What was Alex planning? It was 9:45 in the evening when she heard the front door open downstairs. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat. She quickly put the journal back and slipped out of Alex's room, moving quietly down the hall. She paused at the top of the stairs, peering over the banister. Daniel was standing in the entryway, his coat damp from the rain outside. His face looked pale, worried. "Daniel!" she called out, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up, surprised. "Sarah, what are you doing up there?" "I found something. I think Alex is planning something. Something dangerous." Daniel frowned, glancing toward the hallway. "Alex? What are you talking about?" "I found his journal. He's obsessed with Liam, and he blames me for something. I don't know, but it's serious, Daniel. I think he might try to hurt me." Daniel's face darkened. "That's ridiculous, Sarah. Alex is troubled, but he's not dangerous." "Please, just listen," she began, but her words were cut off by the sound of a door creaking open behind her. She spun around to see Alex standing in the shadows at the end of the hall, a calm smile on his lips. "Talking about me again, Sarah?" he asked, his voice soft, almost playful. She felt a jolt of fear. "Alex, we just want to help you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Alex took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't need help," he replied. "I need Liam, and I need you to stay out of the way." At 10 o'clock in the evening, Sarah knew she had to get out of the house. She turned to Daniel. "We need to leave, now." But before Daniel could respond, Alex's calm demeanor shifted. His smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. "You're not going anywhere," he said, pulling something from his pocket. A small, gleaming object that caught the light. A knife. Daniel stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Alex, put that down. We can talk about this." Alex's hand trembled, but his grip on the knife tightened. "No, Dad. She's the problem. She has to go." Sarah's pulse raced. She had to think quickly. She glanced at the clock. 10:05 in the evening. She knew she only had moments before things spiraled out of control. She took a step back, her eyes fixed on the front door. "Alex, please. You don't have to do this." He took another step toward her, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and desperation. "You don't understand," he hissed. "You never did." At 10:10 in the evening, Sarah made a decision. She bolted for the door, hoping Daniel would follow. She heard Alex shout, heard the sound of footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. She flung the door open and ran into the night, her breath coming in short, frantic gasps. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. She had to find out the truth before it was too late, for all of them. By 10:30 in the evening on November 4th, 2023, Sarah was running through the rain-soaked streets of Maplewood, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see Alex following, but the street behind her was empty, the only sound the steady drumbeat of rain against the pavement. Her clothes were soaked through, and her hair clung to her face, but she didn't stop. She needed help. She needed to get to the police. At 10:45 in the evening, Sarah reached the Maplewood police station. The fluorescent lights inside flickered slightly as she pushed through the front door, her eyes wide with fear. A desk officer looked up, startled by her sudden entrance. "Help, please," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "My stepson. He's dangerous. He has a knife, and I think he's going to hurt someone." The officer's expression shifted to one of concern. "Ma'am, calm down. What's your name?" "Sarah Whitman," she replied, her chest heaving. "I'm afraid he's going to hurt my husband. You have to send someone now." By 10:50 in the evening, Detective Karen Mitchell had been alerted. A seasoned investigator known for her calm demeanor, Karen approached Sarah with a measured gaze. "Mrs. Whitman, you said your stepson is dangerous. Can you explain what happened?" Sarah nodded, trying to steady her breath. "Alex, he's obsessed with his brother, Liam. He blames me for something. I don't know what. He had a knife. He threatened me. Daniel tried to calm him, but I don't know if he succeeded." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "You said he mentioned his brother, Liam. Do you know where Liam is right now?" Sarah shook her head. "He's away at college. Or at least that's what I thought. But Alex kept saying Liam would come back. I don't know what he meant." Karen glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 10:55 in the evening. She turned to the officers nearby. "Get a unit over to the Whitman house immediately," she ordered, "and find out if there's any recent activity involving a Liam Whitman. Run a check on any nearby hospitals." By 11:15 in the evening, Sarah was in the back of a police car, racing back toward the house. The rain had intensified, hammering against the windshield, blurring the lights outside. Her mind was spinning. She needed to know if Daniel was safe. She needed to know what Alex had planned. At 11:30 in the evening, they arrived at the Whitman residence. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Karen drew her weapon, signaling to the officers behind her. "Stay close," she whispered. They entered the house, moving cautiously through the hallway. The air inside was cold, almost unnaturally so, and the only sound was the faint drip of water from a leak in the ceiling. As they reached the living room, Sarah's heart lurched. Daniel was lying on the floor, unconscious, a dark bruise forming on his temple. "Daniel!" she cried out, rushing to his side. Karen crouched beside Daniel, checking his pulse. "He's alive," she confirmed. "But we need to find Alex now." At 11:35 in the evening, a sound came from upstairs, a faint creaking, like someone shifting their weight. Karen motioned for the officers to follow her as she moved toward the staircase. Sarah stayed behind, her eyes fixed on Daniel's face, silently pleading for him to wake up. As Karen reached the top of the stairs, she saw a door slightly ajar, a small light flickering inside. She pushed the door open, revealing Alex sitting on the edge of his bed, his back to the door. In his hands, he held the knife, turning it slowly, the blade catching the dim light. "Alex, Karen said calmly, her voice firm. "Put the knife down. We can talk about this." Alex's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "There's nothing to talk about," he murmured. "Liam promised me. He promised things would never change." Karen took a careful step forward. "Where is Liam, Alex?" Alex's laugh was hollow, almost childlike. "He's here," he whispered. "He's always been here, but she tried to take him away from me." Karen's eyes flicked to the corner of the room, where a large trunk was pushed against the wall, partially hidden behind a curtain. She took another step forward. "What's in the trunk, Alex?" He finally turned to face her, his expression eerily calm. "Liam," he answered, his voice a soft sing-song. "Liam is in the trunk." At 11:40 in the evening, Karen signaled to an officer to open the trunk. As the lid creaked open, the smell hit them first, a sharp, acrid odor that made Sarah gag from the hallway. Inside, they saw a figure, pale and lifeless. It was Liam, his face frozen in an expression of terror. "Dear God," Karen whispered. Alex stood up, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "Now you understand," he said quietly. "Now you see why I had to do it." At 11:45 in the evening, Alex lunged toward Karen, the knife raised. A shot rang out, echoing through the house. Alex staggered, the knife slipping from his hand, his body crumpling to the floor. Sarah's scream cut through the silence as she rushed up the stairs, but it was too late. Alex lay motionless, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. Karen lowered her gun, her hands steady, her expression grim. The clock ticked relentlessly toward midnight as the truth settled over the house, thick as the rain outside. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her, realizing this nightmare was far from over. By 12:15 in the morning on November 5th, 2023, the Whitman house was swarming with police. Flashing blue and red lights illuminated the rain-soaked front yard, casting distorted shadows on the walls. Inside, the living room buzzed with activity as paramedics worked to revive Daniel, who had started to regain consciousness, his eyes fluttering open, confusion etched across his face. Sarah sat on the bottom stair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her body trembling. She couldn't look up, couldn't bring herself to face the room where Alex's lifeless body lay. The events of the past hour replayed in her mind on an endless loop. The sight of Liam's body in the trunk, Alex's calm voice saying, "Liam is in the trunk," and the gunshot that had brought it all to a sudden, violent end. At 12:30 in the morning, Detective Karen Mitchell approached her. "Mrs. Whitman," Karen began, her voice soft but firm. "We need to talk about what happened here tonight." Sarah nodded, her eyes still fixed on the floor. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know about Liam, or what Alex had done." Karen sighed, sitting down next to her. "The medical examiner estimates that Liam's body was placed in that trunk around mid-October. He's been missing for nearly 3 weeks. Do you have any idea why Alex might have done this?" Sarah shook her head, her throat tight. He was obsessed with Liam. I thought it was just because they were close, but there was something else, something darker. I think Alex felt abandoned. Maybe he blamed me for Liam leaving, but I never imagined it could come to this." By 12:45 in the morning, Daniel was conscious, sitting up on the couch, a paramedic checking his vitals. His face was pale, eyes wide with shock. He glanced at Sarah, confusion mingled with fear in his gaze. "Where's Alex?" he asked, his voice strained. Sarah's heart broke at the look in his eyes. She swallowed hard. He didn't make it, Daniel. There was no other choice." Daniel's face crumpled, his shoulders shaking as he began to sob. My son. What happened to my son?" At 1 in the morning, Karen left Sarah to speak with another officer, and Sarah sat in silence, feeling the weight of everything crash down on her. She had come into this house hoping to build a family, to create a new life with Daniel and his children, but all she had found were secrets, lies, and tragedy. By 2:15 in the morning, the scene had quieted. Most of the officers and paramedics had left, and the house was still, save for the sound of rain against the windows. Sarah watched as a coroner's team removed the bodies, first Liam's, then Alex's, both covered with sheets. She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears she could no longer hold back. At 3 a.m, Karen returned to Sarah, a small notebook in her hand. "We found something in Alex's room," she said. "It's a letter he wrote to Liam. It was dated November 2nd, 2023, just 2 days ago." Sarah took the notebook, her hands trembling. The letter was short, but the words were haunting. "Liam, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted things to stay the same. I just wanted us to be a family again. But she wouldn't let us. I know you're gone, but I see you everywhere. I hear you at night calling for me. I'll make it right, I promise. Tomorrow it will all be over." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She realized now that Alex had never accepted Liam's death. He had kept Liam's body, clinging to some desperate hope that things could go back to the way they were. And when she came into the picture, Alex saw her as a threat to the fantasy he had created in his mind. At 4 a.m, Sarah sat alone in the living room, listening to the rain. She felt numb, as if the events of the night had drained her of everything she had left. The house, once filled with tension and secrets, now felt hollow, empty. She realized with a painful clarity that nothing would ever be the same again. By 5 a.m, Daniel, still in shock, had been taken to the hospital for observation. Sarah stood in the doorway, looking back at the house one last time. She knew she could never return, could never live with the memories that would haunt these walls. As she stepped outside, the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and a cold wind whipped around her. She wrapped her coat tightly around her shoulders, feeling a shiver that went all the way to her bones. At 5:15 a.m, she walked toward her car, the police tape fluttering behind her in the breeze. She knew there were still questions that needed answers, still pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. But she also knew that some things were better left buried, that some secrets were too dark to ever fully understand. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the house grow smaller in the distance. She wondered if she would ever truly escape the shadows of that place, or if they would follow her for the rest of her life. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard Alex's voice again, that haunting whisper, "You'll find out soon enough." The road ahead was long and uncertain, and Sarah knew she had a difficult journey ahead. At 6:45 in the morning on November 5th, 2023, Sarah sat in her car, staring blankly at the road ahead. The morning light was dim, struggling to pierce the mist that clung to Maplewood. She wondered if she could ever leave behind the shadows of that night. Alex's voice still echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the darkness she'd uncovered. She realized that the secrets of the Whitman family ran deeper than she had imagined, their roots tangled in loss and obsession. As she drove into the uncertain dawn, one question lingered. Could she ever find peace with what she now knew?